The late afternoon sun poured through the grand display windows of Brooks & Co. Boutique, an upscale clothing store in Chicago, Illinois. Inside, soft jazz played over the speakers, mingling with the quiet murmur of conversations and the occasional rustle of fabric as customers browsed through neatly arranged racks of designer suits and elegant dresses. It was the kind of place where wealthy clients came for tailored fittings or to add another luxurious piece to their collection. The atmosphere was sleek and modern, with polished floors gleaming under the warm lighting. As this refined setting buzzed with activity, the front door swung open and an elderly black man stepped inside. His movements were measured but steady, his posture straight despite the years he carried. He wore a well-pressed brown overcoat, its fabric slightly worn but still dignified, and held a simple leather wallet in his hand. There was a quiet confidence about him, something that drew a few curious glances as he entered. Near the entrance, a young sales associate named Ryan Carter barely looked up from his phone. His expression remained indifferent, his practiced smile thin, his tone polite but distant. "Can I help you, sir?" he asked, his gaze flicking toward the expensive clothing racks, as if silently questioning whether the man belonged there. "Yes," the man replied, his voice calm yet firm. "I'm looking for a suit. My name is Samuel Brooks. I believe I have an appointment." Ryan hesitated for a brief moment, then exhaled lightly before checking the appointment list. With a small nod, he gestured toward the back of the store. "Right this way," he said, leading him toward a seating area near the fitting rooms. Not the best spot in the boutique, but Mr. K. Brooks said nothing. He simply took a seat, folded his hands in his lap, and observed the store. Something felt off. Minutes passed, then several more. Ryan walked by him multiple times, fully engaged with the younger, fashionably dressed customers who had arrived after Mr. Brooks. They were met with immediate smiles, warm conversation, and personalized service, while Mr. Brooks sat waiting, ignored. When Ryan finally returned, his expression was indifferent, his words rushed. "Sorry for the wait, sir. We're really busy right now. I'll be back in a bit." Mr. Brooks nodded politely and thanked him, but he couldn't ignore the way others, many of them dressed more casually, were being helped right away. He noticed the sidelong glances, the hushed whispers. A woman near the register leaned toward her friend, murmuring something while casting a quick look in his direction. Another shopper raised an eyebrow, as if questioning his presence. The minutes stretched on, feeling longer than they should. Ryan returned, but his attitude remained unchanged. "Like I said, we're short-staffed today," he muttered. "It might take a while before I can get to you." Mr. Brooks gave a faint smile. "Take your time," he said, his voice composed. He wasn't the type to make a scene, but the unspoken tension in the room was unmistakable. Still, as he sat patiently, someone across the boutique took notice. Their expression shifted. From his chair, Mr. Brooks watched everything. This wasn't new to him. This kind of treatment wasn't loud, wasn't outright cruel, but it was clear in the delays, the dismissive glances, the quiet exclusion. Yet, he remained poised, his fingers resting lightly on the armrest, as if he were merely passing time. Meanwhile, Ryan continued on, his demeanor shifting effortlessly as he greeted and assisted other shoppers. He laughed with one, adjusted the collar of a blazer for another, and walked past Mr. Brooks without so much as a glance. The discomfort in the store deepened. Near the center of the boutique, a young couple whispered between themselves. "Why hasn't he been helped yet?" the woman murmured. Her partner stole a glance at Ryan, whose indifference remained unchanged. Mr. Brooks reached for the water bottle on the small table beside him, empty. A few feet away, a staff member poured champagne for a woman who had arrived long after him. At last, Ryan returned, holding a garment bag, but it wasn't for Mr. Brooks. As Ryan walked past Mr. Brooks, he barely paused, his tone edged with indifference as he asked, "Still haven't made up your mind?" As if the delay was somehow Mr. Brooks' doing. Mr. Brooks looked up, his steady gaze calm yet firm, carrying a quiet weight that made Ryan hesitate. "Just for a moment. I'm ready to choose whenever you have time," he said, his voice polite but unwavering. Ryan gave a quick nod, muttered something under his breath, and walked away without another word. But he wasn't the only one paying attention. Near the front counter, a woman in her late 30s casually flipped through a store catalog. Dressed in a tailored beige blazer with gold accents, she appeared at ease, but her sharp eyes followed Ryan's every move. Her fingers tapped lightly against the glass display case, her expression growing colder with each passing second. She wasn't just another customer. She was Danielle Brooks, the owner of this boutique. And Mr. Brooks wasn't just any patron. He was her father. But Danielle didn't step in. Not yet. She wanted to see just how far Ryan would go, how he would treat someone he assumed was unimportant. Her jaw tensed as she watched Ryan joke with another customer, his careless arrogance on full display, completely unaware of the storm quietly building within the boutique. The tension in the store was thick. Though Mr. Brooks remained composed, the shift in the air was undeniable. Something had to give. It was only a matter of time. Across the boutique, Danielle leaned against the counter, her fingers still tapping in a slow rhythm. She wasn't someone who lost her temper easily. Years in the luxury retail industry had taught her that patience was often the most effective tool. But this was different. Watching her father be dismissed so easily, so thoughtlessly, filled her with a slow, simmering anger. Danielle had built Brooks & Co. boutique from the ground up. It wasn't just a business. It was a reflection of the values her father had instilled in her. Respect, dignity, and integrity. He had been her foundation, the voice that encouraged her when things got difficult. And now, seeing him treated like he didn't belong in the very store she had built, it felt deeply personal. She took note of every slight, how Ryan barely acknowledged her father, how his tone sharpened when speaking to him, how his smiles came effortlessly for others. Then she saw it, a quick smirk Ryan exchanged with another associate, like they were sharing some private joke. Her grip on the catalog tightened. This boutique was her domain, her pride. Every fabric, every display reflected her vision. And yet, in this moment, she felt something unfamiliar. Powerlessness. Her father was the one person in the world she would never allow to be disrespected. And yet, here he was, enduring it with the same grace and dignity he always carried. But how much longer should she wait? Should she call Ryan out now, making an example of him in front of everyone? Or should she let this moment play out, ensuring there would be no excuses later? She chose the latter. Turning to Megan Patel, the store's assistant manager, she spoke in a low, firm voice. "Keep an eye on my father," she said, nodding toward Mr. Brooks. "I want to see how Ryan handles this. Don't interfere yet." Megan hesitated briefly, then nodded, understanding the weight of Danielle's words. Danielle's attention returned to her father. He checked his watch, his movements slow and unhurried. She knew he wouldn't complain. He never did. He believed people's actions spoke louder than words, and so did Danielle. Soon, Ryan would understand the consequences of his. The energy in the boutique had shifted, conversations had quieted, and more customers were starting to take notice. Ryan, however, seemed either oblivious or emboldened. As he walked past again, Mr. Brooks raised his hand politely. "Excuse me," he said softly, his voice cutting through the murmurs. Ryan stopped, his expression tightening with impatience. "Yes?" he asked curtly, barely hiding his irritation. "I'd like to see the suit now," Mr. Brooks said, his tone still calm. Ryan let out a dramatic sigh, glancing around as if searching for an escape. "I'll be back in a minute," he muttered before turning away, not even waiting for a response. At that moment, Danielle stepped away from the counter. Her movements were deliberate, measured. The air inside the boutique shifted. As she crossed the room, heads turned. Without a word, she reached Ryan just as he was laughing with another customer, still unaware of what was coming. The smirk on Ryan's face disappeared instantly, fading into uncertainty as Danielle stopped beside him. Ryan's forced smile faded the moment he realized Danielle Brooks was standing beside him. "Danielle?" "Hey," he stammered, attempting to sound casual. "I didn't know you were here." "I've been here," Danielle said smoothly, her voice carrying quiet authority. "And I've been watching." Ryan's smile faltered. "Watching what?" Danielle's eyes flicked toward her father before settling back on Ryan. "Watching you ignore Mr. Brooks, who has been sitting here for nearly 30 minutes without so much as a fitting or even a simple offer of water." The color drained from Ryan's face. His gaze darted to Mr. Brooks, who remained composed, watching the exchange unfold with quiet patience. Your father?" Ryan stammered, his voice uneven. "Yes, my father," Danielle confirmed, her tone sharp. "The man you dismissed like an afterthought, the man you decided wasn't worthy of the same respect you've been giving everyone else in this store." A heavy silence settled over the boutique. Even the soft jazz playing overhead seemed to recede. leaving only the weight of the moment behind. Ryan opened his mouth, but Danielle cut him off. "Don't bother," she said coolly. "There's nothing you can say that will change what just happened, and everyone here saw it." She turned toward Megan Patel, who had been lingering near the register, hesitant but clearly understanding the severity of the situation. "Megan," Danielle said, her voice steady, "take over this fitting. Make sure my father receives the best service we offer, immediately." Megan nodded briskly and rushed toward Mr. Brooks, handing him a fresh bottle of water with a string of sincere apologies before personally escorting him toward the finest section of the boutique. Danielle returned her attention to Ryan, her expression unreadable. "We'll discuss your future here later," she said, her tone controlled but final. "For now, you're done for the day. Go home." Ryan stood frozen, his face a mixture of humiliation and regret. Then, without a word, he removed his name tag, placed it on the counter, and walked out, the heavy door swinging shut behind him. For a brief moment, the silence lingered. Then, as if the boutique itself exhaled, the atmosphere slowly shifted back to normal. Danielle approached her father, crouching slightly to meet his gaze, her firm demeanor softening. "You okay, Dad?" she asked gently. Mr. Brooks smiled, patting her hand. "I'm fine, sweetheart. You handled that well." Danielle let out a slow breath, the tension in her shoulders easing. "I should have stepped in sooner." "No," he said with quiet certainty. "You let him show who he really was. Sometimes that's more powerful than stopping it right away." As the store resumed its usual rhythm, it was clear that no one would forget what had just unfolded or the lesson it carried. The boutique's energy had shifted. Conversations resumed, but they were softer, more thoughtful. Customers who had witnessed the moment now looked at Mr. Brooks with newfound respect. Danielle returned to her counter, her face composed, though the anger in her eyes hadn't entirely faded. Nearby, Megan ensured Mr. Brooks received exceptional service, selecting the finest suits with extra care. She spoke with genuine remorse, as if trying to make up for the disrespect he had endured. Mr. Brooks accepted her attention with his usual grace. He didn't need an apology. His quiet dignity had already spoken louder than any words. At a nearby rack, a young couple whispered to each other. "I can't believe he treated him like that," the woman murmured, shaking her head. "It makes you wonder how often this happens, and no one says a thing." Her partner nodded thoughtfully. "It's not just about what you see. It's about what you choose to stand up against when it happens." Danielle caught their conversation as she passed by, their words lingering in her mind. She thought about the countless times people like Ryan had acted this way, unchallenged, unnoticed, simply because no one cared enough to intervene. Sitting beside her father, she felt his hand reach for hers. "You've built something special here, Danielle," he said softly. "But remember, a store like this isn't just about fashion or luxury. It's about how people feel when they walk through those doors." Danielle exhaled. "I know, Dad. And tonight, I let you down." He shook his head, surprising her. "No, you didn't. You made sure the truth was seen, and you handled it with integrity. That's what matters." Across the boutique, the staff seemed more aware, their interactions with customers more careful. It wasn't just about preventing another incident. It was about the silent lesson Danielle had instilled in them. Respect wasn't optional. It was fundamental. As Mr. Brooks finalized his purchase, he cast a glance toward Megan, who gave him a small, apologetic smile. There was no resentment in his eyes, only quiet satisfaction. The moment had spoken for itself. But for Danielle, the lesson wasn't just for Ryan or the staff. It was a reminder for herself, too. Leadership wasn't about running a business. It was about upholding the values that made her boutique worth stepping into. As the night wound down, Mr. Brooks gathered his things, his presence still radiating the same quiet strength. Danielle walked him to the door, holding it open as he stepped outside into the cool evening air. For a moment, they stood together, the golden glow of the boutique's lights casting soft shadows on their faces. "You did good, sweetheart," he said, his voice warm with quiet pride. Danielle managed a faint smile. "I still wish it hadn't happened at all." He placed a gentle hand on her arm. "What matters is how you responded. You gave everyone in there something to think about, something they'll carry with them. That's how change happens." She nodded, watching as he made his way to the waiting car. Just before stepping in, he turned back, offering her one last reassuring smile. Inside the boutique, the staff moved with purpose. the weight of the evening still fresh in their minds. Megan gathered the team near the register, her tone serious yet constructive. "What happened tonight should never happen again," she said firmly. "Not just because of Mr. Brooks, but because this is about who we are as a store. Every person who walks through those doors deserves respect, no exceptions." The staff nodded, their expressions solemn. Ryan's absence was a reminder, a warning of what happens when prejudice replaces professionalism. As Danielle stepped back inside, she scanned the now quiet boutique. The night's events had left their mark, but they had also reinforced something crucial. Brooks & Co. couldn't just be about luxury. It had to be about dignity, too. For those who had witnessed the evening unfold, it wouldn't be forgotten. They had come to shop for fine clothing, but they had left with a story. A story that reminded them of the power of respect, the importance of standing up, and the quiet strength of those who refused to let injustice win. And to you, reading this now, ask yourself, what would you have done in that moment? Would you have spoken up? Or would you have stayed silent? These moments aren't always obvious, but they are everywhere. Let this be a reminder. Always choose dignity and empathy.